In a remote wooden cottage, we find a young girl in a closet feeding a mouse. Suddenly, a thunderous thump echoes from upstairs as screams are heard. Then, drops of blood ominously seep through the floorboards, staining the very spot where the girl is. Overwhelmed by fear, she scurries away and hides. Fast forward 30 years, and that once frightened girl named Betriek is now a mother herself. She resides in a village along with her daughter and parents. One day, as Betriek drives through the countryside with her daughter, they stumble upon a crime scene. Authorities have discovered a pit dug by a local elder, whose life was tragically claimed by hypothermia. Within the depths of this grave-like excavation lie the preserved bones of an unknown woman. As Betriek and her daughter pass the scene, their eyes meet those of a man seated inside a car going in the opposite direction. This man happens to be Jonas, an archaeologist summoned by the villagers to help with the unnatural discovery of the bones. That night, Betriek is abruptly woken up by the sound of her mother thrashing around in her sleep. Wondering what could have caused such a commotion, she decides to investigate. Carefully, she tiptoes downstairs and peeks out of the window. There, in her garden, she sees a mysterious figure moving about. At first, she assumes it must be her father, but to her surprise, she discovers him safely inside the house. The following morning, Betriek wastes no time in sharing her strange sighting. She approaches Jonas, who apologizes to her, asserting that he will personally instruct his workers not to wander around the premises during the night. At a local bar, Betriek and Jonas strike up a conversation. Betriek opens up about her deep-seated dislike for people who greedily seize anything that is offered for free, recounting how her mother would shamelessly gather handfuls of sugar packets in restaurants. However, the effects of the liquor begin to take their toll on Jonas as they make their way back home. Jonas wonders aloud why someone as remarkable as her remains single. The villagers, she explains, perceive her as a cursed individual, so everyone tends to avoid her. She discloses the tragic loss of her grandmother during her childhood, a murder that remains unsolved to this day. The incident devastated her family, leading her father to resort to alcoholism and her mother to suffer from an unexplained illness. Betriek shares that she had lived in New York, but after the death of her husband, she returned home. The next night, Betriek discovers a peculiar man standing in her kitchen. He seems disoriented and clutches a knife in his hand. He quickly apologizes, confessing that he had consumed some of their milk. Alarmed, Betriek rushes to her mother's room, urgently alerting her of the intruder. However, the man slowly inches closer to them and suddenly seizes Betriek's mother. He claims that someone is forcing him to commit this act. A chilling howl escapes his lips before he ruthlessly brings down the knife. In a desperate struggle, Betriek manages to escape up the stairs while her mother tries to defend herself. Fortunately, Betriek's father approaches the man from behind and lands a powerful blow on his head. The next morning, Jonas arrives at Betriek's house, deeply remorseful for the shocking incident involving the assailant, who turns out to be part of his crew. Betriek leads Jonas to her room where they can have a private conversation. Overwhelmed by the weight of the situation, she breaks down in tears, realizing that the cursed fate haunting her family still persists. Meanwhile, downstairs, Betriek's mother says that the haunting echoes of their past are resurfacing. Concerned, her father proposes the idea of leaving the house, but she disagrees. Determined, she rises from her seat and begins to make her way towards the kitchen, but suddenly collapses and faints. At the hospital, the doctors once again conduct numerous tests, but are unable to pinpoint the cause. Amidst the hospital corridors, Betriek's attention is drawn to a girl in one of the rooms. The girl's intense gaze follows Betriek as she moves through the hospital. She follows her into the elevator. Then the girl reaches out and touches Betriek's hand. Betriek reciprocates, but suddenly, the elevator grinds to a halt and the lights flicker off. In the mirrored panel, Betriek catches a glimpse of her reflection and is startled to see a ghostly woman standing behind her. The elevator springs back to life, prompting Betriek to hastily escape. Outside in the parking lot, Betriek bumps into Jonas, who is visiting the attacker in the hospital. Jonas reveals that their crew had witnessed the attacker digging a pit in the vicinity. This revelation triggers a memory in Betriek's mind, and she asks Jonas to join her at the local bar. At the bar, Betriek reveals that the recently deceased local elder was also discovered in the act of digging a pit. A man sitting at the bar overhears their conversation and shares his family's long-standing connection with the supernatural. He reveals that his son, the late local elder, had received a message from beyond the grave, guiding him to the precise location where the bones were buried. Jonas interjects, mentioning the ancient nature of the excavated bones. Deeply engrossed in the tale, the elder's father links it to a local folktale, a story of a lurking monster residing in the bog that borders their village. As Betriek and Jonas drive home, their conversation quickly escalates into a heated argument. Betriek is convinced that there's something to worry about, but Jonas dismisses her concerns, accusing her of being overly paranoid. Frustrated by being labeled as crazy, Betriek abruptly exits the car. Jonas follows her along the path, desperately attempting to apologize for his insensitive remarks. Eventually, the atmosphere softens, and the couple reconciles, sharing a kiss. Later, Jonas is back to work at the excavation site. His team discovers the cause of death for the woman they unearthed. Her throat was mercilessly slit. Shockingly, other bodies are also found with their throats sliced vertically. Determined to uncover the truth, Jonas instructs his crew to delve into the folktale passed down by the elder's father. The legend recounts a time when a king and queen ruled their kingdoms side by side. Within their service, they employed a young girl named Fake, who became mysteriously pregnant. Fearing that her own husband, the king, was responsible for this, the queen accused Fake of being an evil witch. Soon, the village turned against Fake and imprisoned her. Afraid and helpless, Fake desperately reached out to Moloch, the god of child sacrifice, seeking revenge. In exchange for her plea, Moloch demanded that Fake surrender her own life and the life of her unborn child. Fake complied, taking her own life by slitting her throat vertically. In a twisted pact, Moloch granted Fake the ability to possess the queen's body, controlling her every action. Thus, a curse was born, forever haunting the village and plaguing generations yet to be born. In the present, we find Betriek and her mother attending her daughter's play. However, noticeably absent is Betriek's father, who's deep in the forest, digging for something unknown. Driven by curiosity, Betriek decides to meet the elder's father, who possesses extraordinary power. He transports Betriek back in time to the memory from her past. Suddenly, she finds herself reliving the painful moment of her grandmother's passing. Determined to uncover the truth, Betriek ventures towards the excavation site. Suddenly, she realizes that the lifeless bodies of women unearthed here were not mere victims of circumstance. They were sacrificial offerings to the malevolent entity known as Moloch. These women, including Betriek, her mother, and her daughter, shared the same bloodline linked to Fake. Fake had struck a deal that required the sacrifice of every descendant within their bloodline. Each generation, a chosen woman met a gruesome end, ensuring Fake's existence. So Betriek's grandmother became a victim of this horrifying ritual. Under Fake's possession, the grandmother tragically took her own life, completing the sacrifice required for Fake's spirit to transfer into and seize control of Betriek's mother's body. Now, the time has come for Betriek to take her turn as the sacrificial lamb. After the discovery, Betriek rushes back home and urgently begins packing her belongings, knowing that they must leave immediately. Betriek finds her mother and informs her of their departure. Meanwhile, in the woods, Betriek's father roams, unaware of the supernatural forces gathering around him. Suddenly, a chilling whisper pierces the silence. Emerging from the shadows, a group of women in white garments approaches the bewildered father. At their helm is a woman who resembles Betriek's mother. She is the true essence of her mother's spirit. She had been banished from her own body by Fake. The other women in the group are Betriek's ancestral spirits, once sacrificed by Fake to Moloch. These spirits have been possessing the men to kill the mother with Fake's spirit in her. With no other option, they plan to possess the father to put an end to this messed up cycle of sacrifice. As the spirit seize control of the father's body, he unknowingly becomes their puppet. Led by their influence, he makes his way back to the family home and forcibly opens the door. He lunges at the possessed mother, but before he could harm her, Betriek intervenes, striking a blow to her father's head, rendering him temporarily incapacitated. In the aftermath of the chaos, the possessed mother coldly hangs Betriek's father with a noose, killing him. Betriek is then forcefully subdued by her own mother and eventually loses consciousness. When Betriek comes around, she finds herself bound by the bed and garbed in a ghostly white shift. In front of her, her mother sits ominously, clutching a razor blade in her hand. The realization dawns on Betriek that Fake, through her mother's vessel, is about to perform the ritual, one that will complete the next sacrifice and transfer Fake's spirit into Betriek's body. As her mother makes a swift, vertical incision across her throat with the razor blade, Betriek convulses in her bed. Thankfully, Jonas stumbles into the house, desperately searching for Betriek. He finally locates her and immediately frees her from her restraints. Not stopping there, Jonas discovers Beatrix's terrified daughter hidden away in a closet. Some time passes and the two meet in a cafe. He extends an offer to shelter Beatrix and her daughter, but she politely turns it down. She reassures Jonas that she's managing well on her own and urges him not to worry. Just as she prepares to leave, Beatrix slyly snatches a handful of sugar packets from the table. In a flash, Jonas recalls Beatrix's claim of disliking those who greedily snatch up excessive freebies, reminiscent of her own mother's behavior. This unveils that Beatrix has transformed. Beatrix and her daughter continue to live in the same house. One fateful night, as Beatrix reads a bedtime story to her daughter, the spirits of the women show up. The real spirit of Beatrix draws close to the window, tears streaming down her face. However, it becomes apparent that Fake has taken control of Beatrix's body. Thus, the ritual had been successful. Unfazed, Fake continues to read to the daughter, eyes fixated on the figures. As the film ends, the daughter gazes up, catching a fleeting glimpse of the hazy specters drifting past her.